Fries. It's Mrs. Klein.
Hola, amigo. It's Mrs. Wolbren. We are here with Life in the West. This is your Lesson 16 first podcast. And the guiding question, what were the motives, hardships, and legacies of the groups that moved west in the 1800s?
All right, you guys, we've got some vocabulary terms that you need to be familiar with in this lesson. The words are 49ers, immigrant, legacy, Lewis and Clark expedition, Mormons, Oregon Trail, and Rancho.
Okay, here we go. The vast region that stretches from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean is one of the most extraordinary landscapes on Earth. Tourists come from all over to see its mountains, canyons, deserts, and plains.
For all its beauty, the West was a challenging environment, which is reflected in the names that American settlers gave to its features. Only in the West can you find a mountain range called the Crazies, a scorching desert named Death Valley, a blood-red canyon called Flaming Gorge, or a raging river known as the River of No Return.
Despite its geographic challenges, the West was never empty. Perhaps as many as 3 million American Indians lived there before Europeans arrived. And these first Westerners were far more diverse in language and culture than the Europeans who claimed their land.
For most Americans in the early 1800s, however, the West was mostly a blank map. By 1850, it had become the land of opportunity, boasting wide open spaces and great wealth in timber, gold, silver, and other natural resources. It became a magnet for immigrants and for Easterners looking for a new start in life. As Americans began their westward trek, they created new markets for Eastern merchants, and in time, the West changed the nation's economy and politics. It also created a folklore of rugged individualism that has become a lasting part of American culture.
Newspaperman Horace Greeley captured the growing enthusiasm for going west when he wrote, "If you have no family or friends to aid you, and no prospect, which is an opportunity, opened to you, turn your face to the great West, and there build up a home and fortune." In this lesson, you will be learning about 8 groups of people who turned their faces to the West in the early 1800s. You'll learn about their motives, the hardships they faced, and the legacies they left behind.
All right, you guys, the first section is all about the explorers. Okay, all right, in the early 1800s, a number of expeditions set out from the United States to explore the West. The most famous was the Lewis and Clark expedition, which was ordered by President Thomas Jefferson.
In May 1804, the 45-member expedition left St. Louis, Missouri in 3 boats. Jefferson's private secretary, Meriwether Lewis, and his friend, William Clark, led the expedition. Its members included soldiers, frontiersmen, and an African-American slave named York, who worked for Clark.
The explorers made camp for the winter near a Mandan village in what is now North Dakota. There, a French fur trapper joined them, along with his 16-year-old wife, a Shoshone woman named Sacagawea, and their infant son. As a girl, Sacagawea had been kidnapped from her people by another Indian group. Lewis and Clark hoped that she would translate for them when they reached Shoshone country.
Okay. By late summer, the explorers could see the Rocky Mountains looming ahead. Fortunately, the expedition had reached the land of Sacagawea's childhood. One day, a group of Indians approached, and to Sacagawea's great joy, they proved to be Shoshone. Learning that her brother was now a Shoshone chief, Sacagawea persuaded him to provide the explorers with the horses they desperately needed.
The explorers made it over the Rockies, but they were more dead than alive. The Nez Perce, an Indian people living in the Pacific Northwest, saved them from starvation. A grateful Lewis wrote in his journal that the Nez Perce are the most hospitable, honest, and sincere people that we have met within our voyage.
As winter closed in, the explorers reached their final destination, the Pacific Ocean. Clark marked the event by carving on a tree, William Clark, December 3rd, 1805, by land from the United States.
Okay, all right. Lewis and Clark had good reason to be proud of what they did. Although they had not found the Northwest Passage, which is originally what they were looking for, like a waterway across the United States, for that Northwest Passage did not exist, they had traveled some 8,000 miles and had mapped a route to the Pacific. They had established good relations with Western Indians. Most of all, they had brought back priceless information about the West and its peoples.
Other explorers added to this legacy. and helped prepare the way for the settlement of the West. In 1806, the same year Lewis and Clark returned to St. Louis, 26-year-old Army Lieutenant Zebulon Pike set out to explore the southern part of the new Louisiana Territory. Pike and his party traveled up the valley of the Arkansas River into present-day Colorado, where Pike saw the mountain that today is called Pikes Peak.
Another famed explorer, John C. Fremont, nicknamed the Pathfinder, mapped much of the territory between the Mississippi Valley and the Pacific Ocean in the 1840s. His glowing descriptions of a land of plenty inspired many families to try their luck in the West.
Okay, so the next section we're going to talk about is the Californios. In 1769, a Spanish missionary named Junipero Serra led soldiers and priests north from Mexico to California. Serra's goal was to convert the California Indians to Christianity. To do this, he established a chain of missions that eventually stretched from San Diego to just north of San Francisco. Each mission controlled a huge area of land, as well as the Indians who worked it.
Although the missionaries meant well, the missions were deadly to native Californians. When Mexico won its independence in 1821, California came under Mexican rule. The typical Spanish-speaking Californian, or Californio, was granted a rancho of 50,000 acres or more.
Life on the ranchos combined hard work and the occasional fiesta, or social gathering. In the 1830s, cattle ranching became California's most important industry, with cattle providing hides and tallow, which is beef fat, that could be traded for imported goods brought by ship.
Because California was so far from the capital in Mexico City, the Mexican government neglected the territory. Soldiers were not paid, and they took what they needed to survive from the people they were supposed to protect. Officials sent to govern California were often unskilled and sometimes dishonest.
Okay, so the legacy of the Californios. In 1846, the United States captured California as part of the war with Mexico. Before long, Californios were a minority in California.
Still, the Californios left a lasting mark. California is full of Spanish place names such as San Diego, Los Angeles, and San Francisco.
Okay, now just in review as we draw this podcast to a close, explorers Meriwether Lewis and William Clark went west to find that Northwest Passage, which was what they were looking for was an all-water route from Missouri to Oregon country, or to the Pacific.
To the Pacific,
To the Pacific. And to establish friendly relations with the native people, which they did. The expedition helped prepare the way for future settlement.
All right. And then in California, Spanish-speaking settlers followed in the footsteps of missionaries. The Californios' way of life centered on the rancho and raising cattle. All right, you guys, you're welcome.
We're logging off.